All right. All right. Good evening, everybody. We're just getting started. This is the Montgomery County Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We'll get started in a few minutes. We're on Zoom, so it takes a couple of minutes to let everybody in the door. Welcome, everybody.
Matt, you want to open up the chat while we're waiting?
Good idea. Good evening, everyone. If you're just joining, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. I'll give it a couple of minutes and then we'll start. 30 more seconds or a magic number of my own choosing. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Losack. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. If you have any questions or concern as we discuss issues tonight, please put them in the chat. Our staff will be looking in the chat to make sure that your questions and concerns are addressed by ourselves or our panelists. Tonight, we're going to be discussing progress, challenges, opportunities in Gaithersburg and in Rockville regarding renters' rights in particular, progress and challenges to getting rent stabilization in both of those municipalities. The Renters Alliance has been working alongside the residents in each of those communities since we got started back in 2010. But I'm very pleased to say that the tenants in these municipalities have been organizing and getting stronger and stronger. And as someone who's been organizing tenants for a long time, I was just saying to one of our panelists that I have never seen a stronger, more diverse, more eloquent group of folks testifying before a legislative body on issues important to the renters' lives, as well as your communities, than the last hearing that was held at the Rockville Council. Members who testified were young and old, diverse ethnically, racially, gender, but all of their testimony was eloquent, reasonable, fair-minded, and the kind of testimony I think that if I were an elected official, I would pay attention to. So hopefully we'll see some progress. When we started this ages ago, back in 2010, talking to the Montgomery County Council, we literally had a handful of folks who were laughed at by elected officials. Not anymore. Tenants are becoming more aware of their rights, more aware of what it's like not to have their rights, and getting organized to make sure that elected officials respect nearly 40% of Montgomery County, and for that matter, the state of Maryland, who now live in rental housing, not as a station on the way to owning, but possibly as a way of life to be housed for the rest of their lives. They are full citizens who pay taxes, who go to our schools, patronize our local businesses, work in our communities, and are part of the fabric of our communities. We didn't used to be looked at that way. in the past. So this has become a serious public policy issue. Housing is not the same thing as beer and cigarettes and fancy shoes and pocketbooks. It is about the way in which we live, and it completely relates and is a determinant of the health, welfare, and prosperity of our communities. So someone who knows that, we'll let everybody introduce themselves as we go. Let me quickly introduce my own staff. We've got with us David Mullins, our outreach director, Jackie Mashinya, who's our senior outreach coordinator, Tim Huang, who's an outreach coordinator, Emily Towie, also an outreach coordinator, and Pat Beckham, who's also an outreach coordinator with us. Malek Demir is not able to be with us tonight, but she's also on our staff. And we'll introduce or allow them to introduce themselves, our panelists, in a moment. But first, let me say it is an honor to introduce a renter champion who has the distinction of being a lone voice that is gathering voices around her. Similar to County Executive Mark Elrich, again, back in the days when we first got started, he was the only voice on the county council that stood up for renters' rights. And it was hard business. It wasn't popular. But now we have more than 4 members of the council who are pro-renter, and now Mark Elrich is the county executive. So demographics and politics are changing. So someone started this in Rockville, and her name is Izola Shaw, and she's on the county council. And now look what she's done. So with that, we'll turn it to Izola and say, where are we, Council Member Shaw?
Well, thank you so much, Matt, and the Renters Alliance. I'm really excited to be here. So where are we? We've really advanced the movement in terms of rent stabilization. A year ago, July 8th, I was voted down 5-2, and now we have it back on the agenda. And so that is really due to the community and the community power that they've built. And I am here to support. Now, how the mayor and council, my colleagues, try to have this conversation is a different thing. But we at least have it on the agenda for an upcoming meeting. And we're going to talk about rent caps, banning junk fees, exemptions, a fair petition, strong enforcement, all the pieces of a rent stabilization policy. But it is really up to the community, up to the tenant leaders and my support to really continue to push this forward, because we have to fight every single step of the way, because unfortunately we do not have a voting majority.
Yet. So we'll see about that. Well, again, Councilmember Shaw, we are just so proud of your work, so proud to be working alongside of you. And of course, we will do all that we can to support you. We get calls from Rockville renters all the time who are absolutely dejected when they find out that the Montgomery County rent stabilization law does not apply to them. When we hear they don't get the enforcement that they need from Rockville's housing department, and obviously not getting the support from a majority of the Rockville Council so far. So that's been a real challenge. So let's turn it to the Rockville renters. As I say, I was so impressed by the diversity, but also impressed in particular that Izola and the National Institutes of Health Union got together. I'm a union man myself, a card carrying, very proud of it. And I know that when things begin to overlap into the credible organizations that are themselves organized and know something about organized, people sit up. So let me first hand it over to Haley Chatelain, if I got your name right. We were so impressed with your testimony and how you represented your union at that hearing. You're on mute. You're on mute, Haley.
There we go. Zola and I are in the same room, so we're just making sure we don't have weird feedback. Yes, hi everyone. It's really nice to meet everybody virtually, and it's really exciting to be here. advocating for something that's really important, not just for us as workers, but for us as community members. So as Matt said, we had, I think, 5 union members from our union, UAW 2750, NIH Fellows United. Quick little background on our union. We are the largest federal union in a decade, and we are also the only federal union that represents early career scientists, which is really cool because that means that we are a group of 5,000 people, primarily in Maryland, many in Rockville, who are not just interested in doing life-saving research, but also in community power and really engaging with helping people. We all do science at NIH because we care about healing and making people physically healthy. And now with our union, we can all work together to make sure that we're all socially healthy and able to support each other. And so we were really excited when one of our members, Travis, Travis first introduced me to Zola. And then we were able to engage our other members who are from Rockville and even some folks who are not from Rockville but live in the area on, this issue because it's important that we're all able to support each other. And we had about 5 people come out to the community forum, and now we're really looking forward to using our worker power and our ability to organize a lot of people to come out and flex that community power to make sure that we can get this rent stabilization in Rockville.
Awesome. Grant, you were an eloquent presenter that night as well. What's your take?
Yeah, thank you. Just by way of quick introduction, my name is Grant Sams. I am an organizer with Rockville Renters United and also the president of the Reed Tenants Association. I think in a lot of ways I was a little bit of a unlikely addition to this campaign, but I know I got a knock on my door about a little over a year ago now from Zola and a couple other volunteers who let me know what was going on, and I think I slowly realized just how much this cause is worth fighting for, because I'm as one of our city council members likes to claim, I am actually a data guy, and I really love diving into what information says and what we can learn from science and from really good analysis on data about what making the best decisions looks like. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized, wow, there's actually a lot of space here for a policy that puts a curb on some of the most extractive, predatory rent hikes, but also leaves plenty of room for fair, good faith business to continue as usual. And in fact, when you do that, there's a lot of benefit to the community. I mean, economists are really only just starting to do this, but there's a lot of work now being done on what is the actual cost to society of an eviction. Because I know I've got a tenant in our tenant union who she's moved every year for the last 3 years, and her son has been in a new school every year for the last 3 years. She's very, very afraid that's going to be 4. And when I told her that, unfortunately, we're not protected by the county's law, she started to cry, and then I started to cry. It was a rough moment because she's really, like I said, she's very afraid that's going to be 4. And so I think about that particular moment a lot as something that really motivates me to keep fighting for folks, because I'm myself in a position where, I've also gotten 8%, 10% rent increases. I've been lucky enough to have some, what used to be disposable income that could have absorbed that. Now I have significantly less of that, but I can at least stay in my home. And fighting for people that don't have that privilege is something that I have really come to believe in strongly, especially when the data and the evidence lines up to this is quite obviously something we can do. We're watching it work in the county, and I want to see it work in Gaithersburg and in Rockville.
I forgot to mention, we also voted to formally endorse this issue as a union local. So we are super excited for our whole local to join people like Grant in fighting for this cause that matters so much to so many people.
Elected officials, are you listening? Tyree.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tyra Davis IV. I am also a proud member of Rockville Renters United. I think similar to what the others before me said, for me, it really just came down to I want to be housed. And I know that if I want to be housed, I know that there are others that also want to be housed. And as Grant said, I have the ability to have income, still living paycheck to paycheck. But I know what that looks like, and I have some parameters that protect me more than others. So for me, it's always been about impacting people and being the change that I wanted to see. I also used to work in the city, so for me, it was also just interesting on one side to hear our elected officials tell us how much they care about their community, but then when it's time to actually show us that they care, they're radio silent. And it's also interesting that the mayor and council looked at housing as a three tiered approach with supply, subsidy, and stability. But housing stability or rent stabilization was not a part of that conversation. So for me, it's how do you have um, a conversation around stability without really having the conversation that we need now, because those other things take years to get here. So what am I going to do after if my rent keeps increasing at the rate that it is? I have gotten a 10% increase initially and a 7% increase initially. And I am paying over $2,000 a month. I live in Rockville Town Center, so I can't, afford to keep up with my wages aren't going up 10% every year. So it's for me, it's personal. And I have testified many a times, and I will continue to do so. And the election's right around the corner, so if they want support us, then we will once again find candidates who will.
Thanks, Terry. I'll open up a question to all of our Rockville panelists. So we know how each of you like got here, got to be involved, got to be an organizer. If you guys, one person wants to answer, everyone wants to share, what has been like the greatest challenge up till this point? Anyone can take it, and you can all answer if you all want to share your specific challenge.
I'll jump in. To be frank, the biggest challenge for me and biggest frustration for me has been the lack of good faith engagement from our elected leaders who, as Tyree said, say they care a lot, but then do things like ask city staff questions to get more information about rent stabilization before suddenly taking a vote to never discuss it again, leaving a very confused staff wondering exactly what they're supposed to do. Or after telling us this is something they care deeply about, not explaining why they voted that way. Or as Councilmember Shaw mentioned, seeming to hear the outcry of the community over the last year to put this back on the agenda, but then, kind of rushing it back on in a way that seems like they are maybe going for a sort of performative angle. That has yet to sort of be borne out, but I hope for different, but it's been a very frustrating year filled with a lot of moments that seem like they have no place in local politics, let alone, when the stakes are people being, I think the county's term for it is constructively evicted from their homes, trying to bear the brunt of these rent increases at a time when we've seen speculative real estate groups and real estate investment trusts and private equity groups start gaining interest in buying property, apartment buildings, not as homes, but as assets that they want to generate revenue from, and promising their investors double-digit returns in some cases.
Yeah, definitely hear you on that. Tyree or Haley, did you guys? I'm sure you second that challenge. Do you want to share? Otherwise, I can move on to the next question.
I'll hop in, retweet everything Grant just said. I think for me, it's two things. Why can't 5 of our other council people protect us the same way that the county has protections. Is a thing that comes to the top of my mind. We are the county seat, but 70,000 people do not have the same sets of protections that the rest of the million plus people in Montgomery County have. And then the other thing on top of that is why protect billion-dollar corporations on the back of the everyday person? I can understand, how a person who owns 1 or 2 homes and has some smaller margins, but the fact that we are talking generally about corporations and billion-dollar industries that are exclusively on the backs of our residents is frustrating to me, because I have always been taught that it's always people over profit, but it feels that our elected officials are putting profits over people, and that is not only disturbing, but it's also disgusting, because when we talk about these 10% increases, what am I scaling back on in my life in order, which leads to all these other things that I'm giving up. But I just want to stay housed. And I think for me, that's the thing that has been the most frustrating for me.
Yeah, definitely so. So knowing, these are the challenges that people in Rockville are facing, where do we go from here? Like what's Rockville Renters United looking to do next for people watching tonight who want to get involved? Where do we go from here? What can they do next to get involved? What are you guys doing next to further this movement now that it's back on the agenda? What can people do now? And any of you are free to answer.
I think it's the classic answer of organize, which I know might come off as a little bit of a trope, but I've been really, really heartened in the past few months. We've been getting out in communities. We've been talking to not only renters, but we've been talking to homeowners. And when we talk to renters, a lot of times they don't necessarily know what's going on, but as soon as they get filled in on the details about what's at stake, how the vote went down, the details about how the past year have been, they're immediately on board. When we tell them that they have a very strong state protected right to organize tenant associations, to advocate for themselves, a lot of them want to start tenant associations. So that's something that we've been doing is going just community to community, starting tenant associations, getting them strong, and then having those associations go to other buildings and starting more tenant associations. Half of Rockville rents. And so by the time that election rolls around in 2 years, we are going to have I think what Zola just said, 70,000 people, about half of Rockville rents. That's 35,000 people. And I think the highest vote getter in the city council election was like 15,000 people. So if we only get, or maybe even less, 12, so you can do the math on how quickly people are just renters alone are lining up to organize and advocate for our own rights. And then when we get out and talk with homeowners, the vast majority of them have no idea what's going on. But again, when we talk to them and say, hey, here's some information, this is what's been going on, this is what's at stake, a lot of them don't know that the protections don't apply here in Rockville, but a lot of them get incredibly angry. Like I had a very, at first scary and then funny encounter with a woman who came to the door holding like a kitchen knife and was just like, what do you want? And I was like, I'm here to talk about rent stabilization and the rents have been going up. I don't know if you've heard about that. And by the end of the conversation, she was like, well, I don't think I want to own for all of my life. I'm going to get older and eventually I thought I might rent, but you're telling me the rent's going up. This affects me, even though I'm a homeowner now. And then she was like, still angry, but at least in a different direction, not toward me. And that was a really telling interaction for me, and something that is repeated, not necessarily as dramatically, but across a lot of the homeowners that I talk to, where they really see the sense of protecting people against really egregious price gouging and rent gouging, and having those protections in place and bringing the city in line with the county's law.
Yeah, Grant, I think you raised a great point. And something we deal with too is that so many people don't even know that they're exempt from rent stabilizations. Like we'll get calls from people who want to know like about the specifics of the fees, and we actually say you're actually not included in any of that. And that's like you said, that's kind of how you get people to get angry and get people to get involved, knowing that they think that they're afforded certain rights that they aren't. Um, Matt, could you?
Emily, I just wanted to jump in on something that these folks were talking about, which is they should know about the good faith issue. The presumption that I think you all have presented very common sense, fair testimony. So it's not like there's a real policy difference here where somebody says, yeah, but 2 + 2 does not equal 4. So something else is going on. We're dealing with a lot of elected officials, not just in Rockville, but across the state of Maryland. And there is a heavy influence by the landlord developer industry on these elected officials. And so if it doesn't sound like they're listening, it's because they're not. And then it becomes an issue of power. And so that goes to what Grant and Tyree and Haley are talking about, which has to do with organizing, which is one part of power. The other is publicity. Congratulations on that press conference. That got you some good attention. I gave a 20-minute interview, which was reduced to a 4-second, very impactful hello. But beyond that, you guys did a terrific job, and we're all over the place at a good time. Timing is everything. And so we got coverage. And I think that is also a indication of power. When elected officials are looking to see, who's listening to these guys and how much ubiquitous messaging is going on. And then something that tenants associations can do. The Renters Alliance is a 501c3. We do not support candidates or parties, but we do support issues. And so organizing your neighbors to understand what the issues are and where your elected officials stand on those issues is also part of on the ground grassroots power movements. And so that is, what you're doing, Grant being head of your tenants association, that's exactly what needs to happen in Rockville. And if any of these elected officials or candidates have any experience in politics at all, then they ought to be paying attention to demographics. And if you're looking at Rockville, as Zola says all the time, half of the Rockville lives in rental housing. And as Jamie Raskin told us way back in 2007, when we started getting the tenants work group together before there even was a Renters Alliance, he said, if you can organize the tenants, it's a sleeping tiger. So, off you go.
Oh, Matt, while we wait for our before our Gaithersburg guest gets here, Grant has some slides talking about some of the numbers, this 50% being renters. Could you make him a co-host and he can share the slides?
And can I also say to answer the question, Emily, I think we
Go
would
ahead.
love for you all to visit us on our website at rockvillerenters.org. We are also on Instagram at Rockville Renters United and get connected. And because we aren't going away, even if they do talk about it in 2 weeks and decide that they're not going to do anything about it, we're not going away. And I also did want to note that Redfin did a survey that found that 80% of Americans are okay with rent stabilization in 2024, and that's Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. So we are obviously on the right side of history on this, and I look forward to looking back in a decade and telling people that they got it wrong again.
Yeah, and Tyree, feel free to drop your guys' contact information in the chat for people who want to reach out. Grant, before I turn it over to you, I just want to address a question in the chat about someone asked why Rockville and Gaithersburg are exempt from Montgomery County's rent stabilization law. So City of Rockville, City of Gaithersburg, and City of Tacoma Park are independent municipalities. So while they're in Montgomery County, they have their own jurisdiction. City of Tacoma Park is different because they had already implemented their own rent stabilization program. But when Montgomery County decided to pass rent stabilization, Rockville and Gaithersburg, both their individual mayors and councils decided that they weren't going to be joining, which is what sparked this movement in Rockville. And then I put in a residency check in the chat. I'll put the Gaithersburg one as well, but that's the Rockville one. It can be a little bit confusing. People see that their mailing address says Rockville or Gaithersburg. That does not mean you are necessarily in the city limits or not in the city limits. I think the best way to do it is just to do the online check. But yeah, you'll meet someone. You could have a Rockville address and be outside the city limits and have a friend with the Rockville city in their address and be in the city. So I'll drop the Gaithersburg in there as well. But yeah, make sure people, if you're new to our town halls or you're just getting started, check to see which city jurisdiction you fall in first, because it will definitely impact what laws apply to you, what laws don't, who you call when you need help. Of course, you can always call us whether you're in the city or not, but in terms of contacting your own landlord tenant office, your own code enforcement office, it's really important to know which jurisdiction you fall under. And with that, I will turn it over to Grant.
Can
Thank you.
I just
Before I start on some of the numbers, I also wanted to follow up with Tyree and say that if you are in Rockville, or honestly anywhere, but if you're in Rockville especially, and you are interested in starting a tenant association, talking with some folks who have been there, have done that, have been forming that, or kind of learning on the fly, we've got a really good infrastructure set up that we can help you with that. Not to step on Renters Alliance's toes, because I know Renters
No,
Alliance
you
also
will
has
never step on our
really
toes.
good resources
We
for
kick
that
in the
as
same
well.
direction.
But yep, but we are yet another resource that you can pull on. And we would be happy to send one of our experienced people out to kind of talk to you about what that looks like, what works, what doesn't, how to get going, some of the bumps you might experience. Zola, I see your hands up.
Yeah, go with Zola.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in to answer Emily's question about next steps. And as I mentioned before, we have to fight every single step of the way. And one of the fights is making sure that so we have a conversation on the agenda in the future, but we have to make sure that that conversation is fair and supported by information and data, as all work sessions are. They're typically supported with staff information and analysis, and to make sure that we as a body and we can make the best policies possible. And so I anticipate, because of the opposition, strong opposition, that likely this conversation will not have staff support, will not have information, will not have data, and all the city resources that are typically given to a work session. So it's important to continue to advocate for a fair, open, honest conversation.
Yeah, it's amazing how people don't want due process these days. It seems to be a challenge. And if you're not operating in good faith, you certainly don't want a due process. I might also throw in that the Renters Alliance has sat down individually with, I think, just about every council member in Rockville, and we had excellent conversations, and they had wonderful things to say about renters and renter protections, and then they didn't act on anything that they told us. So we understand. As I say, before Rockville, we had similar conversations with council members on the county council who lost their races later on, I should point out, and also with many people at the state level who also either supported us and are doing just fine, or did not support us and either lost their races or moved on to God knows what. So the renter voice is organized and getting more organized and can be very strong. But one thing also worth noting, as I know Councilmember Shaw's strategy is always, that people who disagreed with us before may agree with us later. And so we need to keep the way of egress so that people can change their minds and update their thinking. I know that the mayor, somebody,
Monique Ashton.
Monique Ashton, thanks. Names and dates go on these days. Monique Ashton is a landlord herself, but she also grew up in rental housing and has experienced some of the things that you all are seeing in your communities. And she says she's sympathetic. So how do we get her to a place where she understands that the policy is not going to be mutually exclusive to housing development in Rockville? Whether she's operating in good faith or not, I don't know. I can't read the operation of her mind, but she's not a person without a brain. She's a smart lady. And so keep working on steering the conversation to a good faith conversation and allowing the elected officials the opportunity to change their minds. And of course, ultimately, if they don't, there are consequences to positions taken in elections. So yes, Grant.
Yes, I want to make sure I don't step on the toes of our fellow Gaithersburg folks, so I will go through this quite quickly. But just a couple of numbers to kind of share. There we go. To put some of the what's going on in Rockville and then a little bit into the county kind of in perspective. Like we said before, nearly half of Rockville renters rent, and we've been hearing about rent increases from people 10, 20, upwards of 30% in one case for some numbers that we've seen. And about of the renters in Rockville, over half are rent burdened, and that is up from, so 55% are currently rent burdened, meaning they pay more than a third of their income. That's up from 33% a decade ago. So there has been a real crunch, especially at the kind of bottom end of the income spectrum of folks that are, particularly constrained, that are becoming even more constrained just to try to stay in their homes. And that's also, shown by the fact that evictions for failure to pay in Rockville more than doubled from 2023 to 2024. I need to go back and look at the 2025 numbers as they're rolling out, but there was a while there early in the year where it looked like we were on pace to exceed 2024. I'll need to see how that is looking now, but it's also the rental market that we're in is really changing. So 78% of Rockville's rental units are multifamily. Rockville Renters United did an MPIA, Maryland Public Information Act request, got a lot of information from the city on rental facilities, both single family homes and also buildings. And 78% of the rental units that we've got are those multifamily buildings. And unfortunately, investment groups like private equity firms, if you look just at market rate housing, so, excluding like, county or city owned public housing, things like that, of the market rate, those investment groups now have become a majority owner. So they own 57% of the market rate that units that we have here. And 91% of those units have out of state ownership. So these are, corporations that are headquartered in Boston or London or, Texas, Tennessee, wherever it is. Whereas for some of the smaller privately held, kind of smaller developer built units, that's more 50-50. And a lot of that 50% that's out of state is more like DC, Virginia. So it's not that far out of state. But we were able to do some really good information looking at where the who truly owns these buildings, doing a lot of digging through the business records. But the last thing I really wanted to share today with everybody on the call was looking at some of the early effects of rent stabilization in Montgomery County, because obviously there is, from the industry, a lot of, honestly, fear mongering about the complete disaster that will befall our housing development should we choose to go this path. And in fact, if you look at the county's own data in terms of how many units are in the pipeline now and how many units were created, looking at the mid and high rise rental units, which is really where these large multifamily developers, these, industry or investor backed firms are, really leading the way. Just in that mid to high rise segment, the county brought online in 2024 the most units that it had ever brought to market in the previous decade. They also, looking at who is applying for new licenses to how many new units are going to be added to the pipeline in 24, how many people were applying for approvals. Montgomery County approved 21,031 new multifamily units in 2024, the year rent stabilization went into effect. And that was up from 22 and 23, quite markedly up. And then also, just one last thing to kind of drive the point home is that looking at that, if you look at those approvals and look at what's totally in the pipeline for what's been approved but hasn't been built yet, the county has 1 unit in the pipeline for every 44 residents that they have, whereas in Rockville it's 1 per 78. So both Rockville and the county have been doing very good about building units, but there is much more potential in the county for what's being added currently as opposed to what's been added in Rockville. And this is very much counter to the narrative that's been presented about like, oh, well, everything is fleeing to Rockville because they don't have rent stabilization. No, not really. The county's actually doing, we're not doing bad, but they're doing better.
Thanks for that, Grant. Let me just toss in a couple of nuances. For one thing, not to rain on this parade a little bit, but the building of apartment buildings is a multi-year process. So it doesn't happen the very year that you pass something. They probably had it in the pipeline beforehand. That said, what we do know is that places like Cleveland and Richmond and Detroit and Omaha don't have building going on because these are not economic hubs of this country. They have some activity going, but they're not economic hubs. The DC, New York, San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, these are places of high economic activity, and thus there is high demand for housing. And where you have high demand, you have people who can make money based on that demand. So people want to build where they can, where there's a market for real estate. And so and if you go to Detroit or Cleveland, they don't have very few renter protections and they have no building going on. If you go to Baltimore, you see boarded up housing going down streets almost for miles. So one thing has nothing to do with the other. And if they could build here in Montgomery County, they will, because there's money to be made. What they don't like is they can't make as much money as they'd like to make, but they are certainly going to make a profit. So that's why we're seeing building happening here, building happening in Washington, D.C., which has had rent stabilization for many decades. But obviously, our rent stabilization program needs to include a provision, which I believe Councilmember Shaw would agree with, that new construction would be exempt for a while to make their money back and make a profit margin. Okay, nobody wants to see, nobody's going to invest where they can't make any money, but there are ways to craft a rent stabilization program that takes into account the legitimate interest of a landlord to maintain a profit margin in their rents and keep up with legitimate expenses, balanced with their responsibility to provide stable, affordable, quality housing with predictable and fair rents. And that is not what we're seeing in Rockville or Gaithersburg, and not what we saw in Montgomery County before the rent stabilization program passed. Emily, what else do we have for our Rockville guests?
I think if is there anything else anyone wants to know? I mean, we talked about, your call to action for folks. I did see, I don't know if you guys, there was a question about the yard signs in the chat. I don't know if anyone wants to mention what those are about, how to get one.
They're great.
Well, I'll
Don't be
jump
shy.
in.
It's
We
not the
got a good
activists
collection
we
of
know.
yard signs that we have been, like I said, knocking door to door, talking with homeowners in particular about what's going on and getting their support behind us. And then we've got yard signs that they can use to share that support with their neighbors, with electeds if they live in their neighborhoods, and kind of visibly be a representation of this movement that the community is getting behind. If people are in Rockville and they're interested in getting a yard sign, they can go to rockvillerenters.org. I know Tyree put the link in the chat earlier, and there is toward the top of the page, there's a form link you can click, form you can fill out, and we would be happy to run one out to you and have you supporting us publicly.
I also
Can't hear you, Isola. Can't hear you. Not yet. One of you has to go off mute. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, the yard signs are a great, fantastic, innovative way that tenants are connecting with the homeowners in their community and on their street, and really sharing why rent stabilization is important to them and their family and their community. And we're finding a number of homeowners being connected to the issue of rent stabilization, recognizing that they themselves want a stable community and they want their neighbors there. And so I just wanted to share kudos to Renters United for that really innovative and great idea.
Yes, it certainly is. And I think we may adopt it ourselves when we start moving to good cause eviction at the state level. As I said, we got it across the finish line in the House of Delegates, 96-37, but it stalled badly in the Judicial Proceedings Committee, chaired by Senator Will Smith, and the Senate in general. But we think that if it were to get out of committee to the Senate as a whole, that it has a pretty good chance of passing. All it is local enabling legislation. So it would allow Montgomery County to pass good cause eviction protection. And for those who don't know what that is, right now in the state of Maryland, with 60 days notice at the end of your lease, a landlord could decide not to renew it. They don't have to provide a reason. And it's great cover for all types of abuse, from racial and ethnic discrimination to retaliation against tenants pursuing their rights. And it is absolutely unconscionable that the Maryland Senate hasn't passed it yet. So we might take the lawn sign approach and start moving that around the state of Maryland with some of our allies. And by the way, all of you Rockville people, we expect you to join into that statewide campaign as well, as if you don't have enough to do. David Mullins, we have another guest.
Yes, yeah, we have. So to shift to Gaithersburg, I see some people asking about Gaithersburg in the chat here. So thank you so much for setting us up, our Rockville folks. Very inspirational. Yeah, I live in Gaithersburg. I'm a renter there. I'm the commissioner on the landlord tenant commission. I'm a tenant representative up here in Gaithersburg. And also with us tonight, we have my neighbor, Demetrius Henriquez, who is an activist here. He and my wife, Lindsay, are the leaders of the Gateway Apartments Tenants Association here. It's we're the largest complex in Gaithersburg with almost 800 units. And yeah, so I've certainly been able to appreciate firsthand Demetrius's organizing efforts. So I'm really happy that he's here to join us. I was just going to set up a couple background info items and then see if he wanted to share some thoughts about where we're at. But so to kind of answer the question, Gaithersburg is in a very similar legal situation that Emily laid out, where we don't have the county rent stabilization protection, and then we do not have support from majority of our council. But here in Gaithersburg, we actually have support from no one in our mayor and council on this issue, and all but one of them have been just really blatantly outspoken against it. And so in Gaithersburg, where we saw a bit of, we haven't had the mobilization at the level of Rockville lately, but we've had, first of all, it's nice to see we're building some now, I think, thanks to what's going on in Rockville. And then also we had some earlier flare-ups around when our mayor and council decided to write a letter in opposition to the county's proposed rent stabilization when they were debating that. And I mean so all but one of our council members, Councilmember Rob Wu, decided not to decided to abstain, but the rest of them sent that letter. Then there was a small mobilization of testimony after that called them out on that, a little bit of press coverage and things. But otherwise, no, it's been tough going, but still, like I said, we're seeing a little bit of progress as the word gets out that we are, because just like in Rockville, first people have to know that they're not covered, and we have a lot of that terrible moment here where it's like, wait a minute, I thought we're in the county, and we have to educate people on that. But yeah, so it's worth mentioning in Rockville also. We want to remember they have two people in the council, because it's Council Member Dr. David Miles is the other supporter. And I do want to just mention too, because Matt made the point of, don't forget people what it looks like when someone changes their mind. Councilmember Miles really it was very big of him to do this Baltimore Banner piece that explained that I got it wrong before, and here's how. And so we understand with the interests that are pushing this narrative that Matt and Grant just kind of tore apart, as kind of the one reason that they're not going to build. It's understandable that people will feel the pressure, but then as the tenants put on the pressure, we hope, like in Rockville, we can see that continue, build up a little more here in Gaithersburg. So we've got, like I said, I'm going to kick it over to Demetrius in a second here at the Gateway Apartments. But we're excited to see, in Old Town, there's Gaithersburg Station, Park Station. We've heard of some people at Cedar Court there, and then some of the other garden apartments like Amber Commons and things. We're hearing from tenants. So if you're out there in Gaithersburg and you're renting, or if you're a homeowner ally, like we were talking about, this is very much a burgeoning movement here too, and we very much need the support. So please connect with us on that. But yeah, so Demetrius, we just heard from the Rockville folks earlier, just kind of about where we're at, challenges and things, experiences. You want to just introduce yourself, give a little bit of that?
Sure. Hi. I think I actually I'm familiar with most of the folks here, but and I do actually see a couple of people who I haven't met before, so it's really nice to meet you guys. My name is Demetrius Enriquez. I'm David's neighbor in the Gateway Apartments in Gaithersburg. I'm happy to say that we have over 100 members signed on officially to our tenants union. So that was a really big milestone we passed recently. We still need more, but I'm really happy to be there. So I think the only thing I would add is that last week we had a little barbecue, a little get together. It was a good time by the pool. And we had some pretty good turnout. I saw Zola Shaw there, so thanks for coming out to that. And we also saw, I think, like was getting mentioned earlier, with the mayor and city council, with some other prospective members or some prospective candidates for mayor and city council. And so it was nice that they turned up and they got to engage with us. We also did invite incumbents. They unfortunately did not show, but I think, also like we were mentioning earlier, that, we need to hope that they change their mind. And if they don't, then there does need to be, some sort of consequences for that. And so we're hoping that November 5th, that there are some candidates who can earn our vote. So that's pretty much the only other piece. I think that in that whole election, gearing up for that, I think tenants unions and renters are going to play a much larger role than they have in the past. I think that previous candidates and incumbents have focused more on areas of high home ownership, like the Kentlands and other neighborhoods like that. And so I'm hoping that this year renters can be a lot more engaged in that process, and we can hopefully get somebody who is going to be responsive to us and our needs. And so I mean, I think that's pretty much the only thing I like to add. I just wanted to say to Grant that those numbers were really awesome, and that I think that Gaithersburg is very similar. We're not too far behind, and in some ways, even worse than Rockville. And so I'm glad that there's some numbers that we can put to what I think most renters already are feeling. So that's pretty much all I wanted to add. And thanks for having me and letting me speak.
Oh, thank you. That's a key difference that it's mentioned in Rockville. It's in 2 years, I think, right? The November after is their next municipal election. But in Gaithersburg, we have one that this year. And so, that's thank you for putting that out there. And seriously, Grant and everyone on your team that is engaging folks in the weeds, on some of this policy stuff is just very helpful, because it's a lot of it is just this kind of not true window dressing, but it's really hard for a lot of the folks that come down, and they feel like they kind of get shut down by the mayor and council and that kind of thing. But it's just false. I go to all the city meetings, and not just the mayor and council ones, the committee ones, including the economic and business development committee. And the economic and business development staff and those folks of the committee they're shooting down housing projects left and right for reasons under viability and all these other kind of how the community looks and things. And it's just not true to pin this all on renter protections, or really at all. So I'll double that thanks to you for that. But that's kind of where we're at in Gaithersburg, and yeah, join us. And we got some shout out from a couple complexes here, a couple I mentioned in Cedar Court and another place, so in Old Town. So yes, please, Old Town, Gaithersburg, and surrounding areas, get active with us, and let's hit those doors together.
For those of you who are too young, which is all of you except me, we started the Home Act Coalition, I think in 2000 and maybe 16 or 17. It took at least 10 years to get the state of Maryland to pass source of income discrimination protection. So many times we have to keep in mind that this takes time. So don't lose heart, don't get impatient, even though people who are suffering and being forced out of their homes are going to be impatient. Take advantage of, unfortunately, as Brian Frosch, the former Attorney General, used to counsel us all the time, he said, don't let any crisis go by without taking full advantage. We're in a housing crisis, and people are suffering big time. And unfortunately, with the chaos being produced by Washington, D.C. at the moment with the federal government, it's going to get worse. And so we believe that politics as usual on the local level is not sufferable anymore. We're going to have to depend on our local elected officials, our state officials, our governor, to do the right thing for our local municipalities, because it's not going to be backed up by federal support. So, don't lose faith. Keep up the good work. Sometimes it takes a while, and if you're lucky, what has been done before will allow you to get it done sooner rather than later. So again, we're really delighted to see you all as allies in the field, doing this important work. We're there to help any which way we can. Somebody mentioned, was it Grant who said, you're stepping on our toes? Never would you be stepping on our toes. This is an alliance, and there's no way we can do it ourselves. Part of our ingenious plan was to get you all to start doing it too. So far it seems to be working a little bit at a time, but every time we see a tenants association pop up, every time we see renter activists get active, and especially when you all are smart and credible, as you sounded in that last hearing, that is what we want. So we're no toes stepping here. We thank you for extending the reach of what we stand for, which is stable, affordable, quality rental housing for everybody. So we're just going to throw in a few more pieces of information. I did get word from the director of the Office of Consumer Protection that he is not able to join us for technical reasons, but he will be joining us after July 14th when the Consumer Protection Law for Montgomery County kicks in, which will extend the ability of some tenants to enforce their rights based on consumer protection law. So I'm going to turn it now to my staff to quickly go over some available resources. And for that matter, we might mention the resources available in the municipalities for those who live in those municipalities. But let's, what did we say first? Ace, was it? Yes, Emily.
Sure, Matt. I was just answering a question in the chat from someone about what percentage of Gaithersburg residents are renters. It's 49%, so essentially 50% in both Rockville and Gaithersburg, which really puts things in perspective that half the people are renters and are not protected. So speaking of, trying to protect people, want to talk about the Access to Counsel and Evictions program. So this is through the state. This is free legal representation for people who are facing eviction. So if you have a summons for failure to pay rent, for a breach of lease, and you meet the income guidelines, it's supposed to be designated for low income renters, there is free legal representation available. So you can call 211 to do an intake with them, and then there's like local legal aid agencies that could possibly take on your case or tell you if you have a case or if you don't. They're not going to be able, they're free. They're not going to be able to help everybody, but it's a good resource to talk to. Just to know what they can, even if they're not going to like represent you in court, just to give you legal advice. We're none of us are lawyers, but what we'll always tell tenants is that make sure you go to your court date. It's really important, even if like different circumstances, it's always important to go because even if you didn't pay and that's not disputed and I fell behind last month, I didn't pay, it's still important that you go. There's also there's also attorneys there say at the courthouse. Not every day, but usually they are there, I think, for same day representation. So if you usually the cases are at 9 a.m. or 1 p.m. So if you have, I would recommend like if you have a 9 a.m. case, get there a little bit early. Usually there's lawyers at like the end of the hallway. I believe they're not allowed to approach you, but they'll make an announcement saying like, hey, anyone have a case today, and you can go down and talk to them. So on that note, also make sure you bring all your paperwork with you, your summons, your ledger, any notices from the landlord, your if you have like money order receipts, things of that nature. So that's like you can get connected with them the same day, but of course, if you could get connected with them before court, that would be even better. Give the lawyer more time to prepare. Perhaps they're going to ask for continuance for you or something like that. So I'll put that information in the chat. So like I said, you can call 211 to do an intake with the overall program, but we'll also give you the direct numbers to contact Casa Legal Services and Maryland Legal Aid. Those are the two locals. So I'll put their numbers in the chat. And then I'll mention one other legal resource at the courthouse on the second floor. They do have the district court help desk. This is a little bit different. They're not going to represent you, but they can help advise you to like represent yourself, help you file motions with different documents, with the paperwork, things like that. So that's another resource. And if you are facing eviction and you're not sure where to begin, please reach out to us. We can help connect you to one of these legal services. We can, look at, even though we're not lawyers, we look at the court summons all the time. We can look at your lease, try to give you advice, and then connect you with the lawyer if need be. So yeah, I'll put all that information in the chat.
Jackie.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be talking to you all about the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs, also called ALTA. So ALTA is there, that's part of the county. They inform the public of the general rights and responsibilities of tenants and landlords, and they help to resolve disputes amicably. They also provide resources, including the Landlord Tenant Handbook, which covers, the language for your lease, the rules regarding security deposits, the process of putting of notices and of breaking the lease. They also provide you different forms and guidance for both landlords and for tenants. And they also are there to provide guidance for the rights of tenants to organize and to also be able to meet in the common areas of your buildings if you want to have tenants meetings. Another thing that the ALTA does is they aim to prevent problems and offer mediation between landlords and tenants. And then they also investigate complaints not resolved through mediation. And they do that by addressing complaints that are filed through their website, or if you call them at MC311. But we always implore tenants to try and work out whatever issues you have with your landlord first before you file a complaint. In the chance that the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs cannot resolve the issues through mediation, then they refer you up to what's called COLTA, which is the Commission of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. So that is generally what ALTA does. And I'm going to provide a link to their website in the chat. And if you ever have any questions, you can directly call ALTA at 311 and they can answer your questions. So.
Thanks. And also, just as a reminder, Gaithersburg, Rockville, and Tacoma Park have their own housing departments and their own code enforcement and their own landlord tenant enforcement. Tacoma Park contracts with with Montgomery County. So actually, Montgomery County does handle Tacoma Park's code enforcement, and we do urge Gaithersburg and Rockville to do the same down one of these days. Might make everything consistent, but right now, Gaithersburg and Rockville have their own housing departments, their own code enforcement, their own Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs, and we'll put those links in the chat as we go. And Tim, you want to tell us about code?
Yeah, sure. So, we all want everyone to live in good and safe conditions. And if there's anything that you think is broken or not safe or needs repair, you can reach out to the county code enforcement, or as Matt mentioned, if you live in one of the city's code enforcement to file a complaint. And the process is similar to Ulta, where we recommend that you ask your management first to fix it. And if within a reasonable time they haven't fixed the issue, then we would recommend you go to code enforcement, and we can help you guide you through that process. Now, what is the reasonable amount of time depends on the issue, right? Let's say that there's a leak in your coming from the roof. That is something that is what I would consider almost an emergency. And if they don't fix it within 24 hours, I would definitely call code enforcement. Now, something like, let's say that there is, your hallway light is broken. That's, in my opinion, a little bit less of an emergency, and I would give them maybe a couple of days to do that before calling code, just to maintain, a good relationship with your manager. So if you have any questions to that, feel free to reach out. But that's that's something that you all have the right to have.
Sorry, just loading it into the chat so that you all can, there we go. There's Gaithersburg. And
I'll link the website for code in the chat. You can also call 311 to make the claim. Sorry, I missed that.
Rockville housing. If Isola doesn't beat me to it, hang on. Rockville. City of Rockville.
One last couple thing is some of the issues that are relevant for code these days is your air conditioning. Montgomery County has an air conditioning law. So if your air conditioning doesn't work or your place isn't cooling down, that's one thing. And there's, I believe, a new mold law, right? Matt, do you know what the details on that is?
On the air conditioning?
No, for mold.
Mold, I know that Senator Shanika Henson passed for the first time, I think, in the state of Maryland, a law that requires a certain type of mitigation of mold, which didn't exist before. The standard enforcement for mold, if it's visible, then they had to tell them to mitigate it somehow, and oftentimes landlords would just paint over it. Shanika Henson's law goes further and says, look, if there's a mold problem, they have to look in the source of it, and they have to mitigate it somehow so that it's no longer a health hazard. And we are trying to get Senator Henson on one of our town halls to discuss the details of that. But it's becoming a growing problem. Obviously, global warming has a lot to do with the kind of environment that many of these apartment communities exist in, and mold and other types of fungus are becoming more common and impacting the renter community, particularly people with respiratory problems and seniors. So really quite something. We have seen pictures. I've taken pictures of mushrooms growing in hallways in some of these apartment buildings. So it's really quite something. All right, any other questions or concerns raised for our panelists or for our discussion in general? Now would be the time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pat Beckham. I know we all know how important it is for everyone to vote, the tenants to vote, because that's where our power lies. The only other thing I want to emphasize is for the tenants to research who they're voting for. and see if the legislators are people who care about them. So it's one thing to vote, but you need to vote for those people who are for renters. So the activists, council people, everyone, if you come in contact with any tenants in your building, tenant association, make sure you emphasize the need to research who your council person is so you'll know how to vote intelligently.
Thank you for that, Pat. I'm scrounging for our "I'm a renter and I vote" button. You guys got lawn signs. We got buttons. So anybody who needs a "I'm a renter and I vote" button, let's contact us at info@rentersalliance.org. Where we are down to a few hundred, but there it is. Thank you, Pat. Nothing is scarier for an elected official than that. If they don't support renters' rights, that's for sure.
That's right.
So let us know if you want some. We're happy to give you some, and we'll be getting a whole lot more this summer and fall as we get ready for election season. And again, let me just put in another plug quickly for Good Cause Eviction. For us, it is the #1 issue outside of rent stabilization in the state of Maryland. Tenants can never be completely secure knowing that a landlord can evict them without having to state a reason at all. That is a big problem. It is a problem that does not exist in New York, in New Jersey, in Washington, D.C., parts of California, and other parts of the country that have long-standing renter protection laws. So it's time that Maryland catches up with the rest of the nation that cares about renters. Other questions or concerns?
Yeah, Matt, I did see a question that I wanted to mention about. Someone mentioned they're living in Rockville Town Center and wanted to know what they could do if they got a large increase. And I don't know if it got mentioned that even in the jurisdictions that don't have a rent stabilization law, if still an outrageous increase, that can still be considered a constructive eviction. And that staff, I can speak more to Gaithersburg, but I think it's pretty similar in Rockville. Staff will receive and entertain those kind of complaints. And what I've seen the practice in Gaithersburg is while there's no hard cap to point to, unfortunately, the staff will say, can you at least somewhat justify this increase? Can you explain this level of increase? And then, of course, those complaints are the mayor and council know, from staff how many types of complaints and things are coming in. So there's many reasons to still go ahead and bring that to the attention of the city staff in those jurisdictions if it's a high increase.
I also just wanted to mention for the person in Rockville Town Center, if you do want to send an email to the Landlord Tenant Affairs, feel free to copy me as well, and I put my email in the chat.
All right. Our next town hall will be July 18th. And we've invited Elise Thompson, who is the new director of the Department of Housing and Community Development. That's the State Housing Department, Office of Tenant and Landlord Affairs. That is an office that the Renters Alliance pushed very hard for the creation of. I was on the transition team for Governor Wes Moore's housing transition, and our board chair, Will Roberts, was the co-chair of that transition team. And we met with Jake Day, the Secretary of Housing, before he was Secretary of Housing, and said, you know what, your department has never focused on renters before, and it's time that you do. So they created this Office of Tenant and Landlord Affairs. And they have also issued, as of yesterday, the state's first Tenants' Bill of Rights, which is progress. Again, not nearly the progress that we want, but progress knowing where we've come from to now we're getting some attention on the state level. This is good progress. And we had the privilege of meeting with Elise today, and we were very impressed with her. Very smart woman with a lot of credentials. She is a lawyer and had worked for HUD for many years. And we're just very impressed and very hopeful that her stewardship of this program is going to impress all of us. So she's going to join us on July 18th to give us a rundown of the Tenants' Bill of Rights and answer any questions about what it does and what it doesn't do, so that we can all be informed about what we still have to do when we organize and advocate for improved policies and legislation. So with that, I want to say thank you very much, especially, of course, to Councilmember Zola Shaw for her leadership, to these tenant leaders and champions, and to the people who are not here with us tonight, who are also tenant leaders and champions. We know that you're representing them here tonight. Well, there's a lot of them out there, and they are often unsung, but we're singing them best we can. They're really terrific and doing very, very important work. Let's all stick together. With that, I say thank you to everybody and good night.